The smoke was already there when I arrived, thin and grey, resting on the buildings like dust that never settled. It clung to the concrete walls and the metal railings, caught in window grills and stair corners. Ghost month had begun. No banners. No loud signs. Just the smell of incense drifting through the hillside streets, quiet and steady. I stood at the bottom of the building and looked up. My grandmother's flat was on the 6th floor. No elevator that worked right, just a narrow lift that groaned like it hated being awake. The building leaned into the hill, old and tired, with pipes wrapped around it like veins. I had not been back since the funeral. I told myself I came to clean, to pack things, to close a door. The lift doors were open. Inside, the mirror was cracked from the corner down. My face split into two parts. One looked calm. The other looked like it wanted to turn back. I pressed the button. The doors closed slowly, like they were thinking about it. The lift moved up one floor, then another. The light flickered. It stopped between the 4th and 5th floors. The hum grew louder, then softer, like breathing. I waited. After a long moment, the lift shuddered and continued. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Her flat smelled the same. Old wood, cold tea, a hint of medicine. The windows were shut, but the smoke still found its way in. It curled near the ceiling, thin lines moving without wind. I put my bag down and stood still. The altar was still there, against the far wall. A small table with a faded cloth, a bowl for rice, a cup for tea, 2 red candles, melted low. The photo of my grandfather watched from the center. His eyes followed you if you moved too fast. I bowed once, not deep, just enough. Behind the altar, tucked where the wall met the table leg, something caught my eye. A corner of red paper, newer than the rest. I bent down and pulled it out. It was a bundle of incense sticks, not the usual kind. These were black from stem to tip, wrapped tight in red paper. On the paper, written in careful strokes, were 2 words: never burn. I stared at them longer than I should have. My grandmother's writing was neat and firm. She did not waste ink. If she wrote something down, it mattered. I turned the bundle in my hands. It felt heavier than it should. The paper was warm, though the room was cool. I didn't open it. I slid it back behind the altar, then stopped. After a moment, I picked it up again and slipped it into my pocket. Outside, the street had changed. Tables had appeared near doorways, plates of fruit, bowls of rice, cups filled with tea or rice wine, paper money stacked neat, waiting. People moved slowly, careful with their steps. No one laughed. No one rushed. An old woman across the hall sat on a stool, folding joss paper. Her hands moved without pause. Fold, press, turn, fold again. Her eyes stayed low. When she noticed me watching, she nodded once. Not a greeting, more like a warning. Back for Ghost Month, she said. Just for a few days, I replied. She went back to folding. Be careful then. I asked her what. She meant, but she didn't answer. As evening fell, the light in the corridor dimmed. One of the ceiling bulbs buzzed, then steadied. The air felt thicker. Sounds travelled farther. A door closing 3 floors down sounded like it was right behind me. I cleaned until my hands smelled of dust and soap. Old clothes went into bags, papers into boxes. I left the altar untouched. Some things did not belong to me. When night came, the building grew quiet in a way that felt watched. Not watched by eyes, watched by walls. The pipes clicked. The floor creaked. The lift groaned somewhere below, even though no one had called it. I stepped into the corridor to throw out trash. The lights flickered again. For a second, the hall looked longer than it should. The doors seemed farther apart. Then the lights steadied, and everything was normal. Almost, I smelled something sweet. Not floral, not food. Sweet and sharp at the same time. Like metal left in the sun. I froze. The smell came from nowhere and everywhere. I touched my pocket. The incense was still there. Back inside, I locked the door. The lock clicked twice, though I turned it once. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened. My phone buzzed with a message. From a friend, asking how things were. I didn't answer. Later, as I lay down, I heard footsteps in the corridor. Slow, careful. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath. After a long moment, the footsteps moved on. Sleep came in pieces. I dreamed of the lift stuck between floors, of smoke filling the gap, of voices whispering names that slipped away before I could hear them. I woke before dawn. The room was grey. The air felt heavy on my chest. I sat up and listened. Silence, deep and wide. I checked my pocket. The incense was warm again. I didn't know why I kept it. I only knew that once, a long time ago, someone had burned it, and the building had learned the smell. The mornings grew quieter as ghost months settled in. Not empty, just careful. Sounds stayed close to the ground. Shop shutters rolled down earlier each day. Street vendors packed up before the sun dipped behind the hill. By dusk, the streets belonged to smoke and small fires that burned low and steady. Altars appeared at corners I had walked past my whole life. One day they were not there. The next day they were. A red cloth over a crate. A bowl of rice. 3 cups of tea lined up like they were waiting for guests who never arrived together. No one announced them. They simply showed up, like weeds. After rain, I learned the rules without being taught. You learned them the way you learned when rain was coming, by watching how people moved. No one whistled. A man stopped his child when the boy started to hum. Phones were set to silent at night. People didn't say names after dark, even on calls. If they had to talk about someone, they said him or her or nothing at all, and no one burned incense indoors, except for the usual kind. At the usual times, on the altar, with the windows open and the door cracked. Even then, people watched the smoke like it might turn. I kept busy. I cleaned shelves, sorted old photos, threw away things that smelled too much like medicine. At night, I sat by the window and watched smoke drift between buildings. It moved slow, like it was thinking. The black incense stayed in my pocket. I didn't mean to keep it there. I just never found the right moment to put it back. When I touched it, my fingers tingled, like I had held something cold for too long. On the 3rd day, I met the old woman again. She was still folding joss paper in the corridor. The pile beside her had grown taller. "You're still here," she said. "I leave tomorrow," I lied. She nodded, like she already knew that wasn't true. Her hands kept moving. I hesitated, then asked, "Why are there so many rules this month?" She pressed a fold flat with her thumb. "Because some things don't listen unless you are strict." I waited. She didn't look at me. "What happens if you break them?" I asked. Her hands stopped. Just for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thin, dry. "Depends which rule." I thought of the incense. "What about burning the wrong smoke?" She finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp, clear, to awake. "Some smoke is a door," she said. "Most people only need windows." I didn't understand. She didn't explain. That night, I dreamed of the corridor. It stretched longer than it should. The walls leaned inward. Doors lined both sides, all the same color, all shut. I knocked on one. Nothing happened. Then I heard knocking behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. The knocking came again. Louder this time. From inside the doors. I woke with my heart racing. My hands were clenched. When I opened them, grey dust fell onto the sheets. Soot clung under my fingernails, packed tight like dirt after rain. I went to the sink and scrubbed. The water ran grey, then clear. My nails stayed dark. The incense felt heavier that morning. When I moved, it shifted in my pocket like it was settling into place. I could swear it made a sound, not a noise, more like a feeling. A low hum, deep and slow, like counting. I tried leaving it behind when I went out for food. I set it on the table next to my keys. When I reached the street, my pocket felt wrong, too light. I turned back. The incense was back in my pocket. I didn't remember picking it up. That afternoon, a radio crackled to life in the flat next door. An old station. Static wrapped around a voice that sounded far away. A chant drifted through the wall, broken and uneven. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm pressed into my chest. I knocked on the wall. The sound stopped. Outside, a child knelt by an altar near the stairs. He placed a bowl of rice down carefully, both hands steady. He bowed once. No adult stood with him. "Who's that for?" I asked. He looked up at me. His face was calm. "For the one who waits," he said. "Does he come?" I asked. The boy shook his head. "Not yet." I didn't know what to say. When I looked again, the child was gone. The rice sat untouched. That night, I turned on the TV for noise. The screen flickered, then went black. I turned it off. Silence filled the room, thick and full. I sat at the altar. The photo of my grandfather watched me. I bowed. The incense pressed against my leg, warm through the fabric. I remembered my grandmother's hands, strong, steady. How she tied red string around door handles during Ghost Month. How she never explained why. "You kept secrets," I said softly. The room didn't answer. Sleep came late. When it did, it pulled me down hard. The corridor dream returned. This time, the doors were open. Inside each one was a small room. An altar, a bowl of rice. No photos, no names. The knocking came again. Closer. I woke with my hands curled tight. Soot coated my palms now. It smelled sweet. Metallic dot. I sat up, breathing slow. The incense hummed in my pocket, steady and patient. It felt less like something I carried, and more like something that carried me, as dawn crept in, pale and weak. I understood something without knowing how. The incense wasn't hidden to keep it safe. It was hidden to keep me safe. And now that it was with me, it wasn't waiting anymore. Rain came in the late afternoon, sudden and loud. It struck the metal roofs and bamboo scaffolds like thrown coins. The heat broke all at once. Air rushed through the streets, lifting paper scraps and old smells. The building groaned as if it had been waiting for this. I stood by the window and watched the storm bend the trees below. The incense in my pocket felt awake. Not warm this time. Sharp, pulling. I tried to ignore it. I made tea. The kettle clicked off, then on again by itself. I unplugged it. The room stayed dim even with the lights on. Thunder rolled close, then closer. The pull grew stronger. Not a voice, not a thought, a direction. I stepped into the corridor. Rain leaked through a crack near the ceiling, tapping into a bucket someone had left out long ago. The lift light blinked once and went dark. The stairwell door at the end of the hall stood open. I took the stairs down, past the 5th floor, past the 4th. Between the 3rd and 2nd floors, I felt it stop. The air changed. Cooler. Still, there was a wall there. Plain concrete. No sign. No handle. I had passed this spot 100 times and never noticed it. Now it pressed against my chest, heavy with silence. My pocket burned. I pulled out the bundle and unwrapped it with shaking hands. The black incense looked dry, almost fragile. I lit one stick with my lighter. The flame caught fast, then died. Smoke poured out, thick and grey. It didn't rise, it spread. The smoke folded in on itself, rolling low across the floor, climbing the wall like slow water. The concrete darkened. A line appeared, then a frame. A door formed where there had been nothing. It was narrow, tall, and plain, would worn smooth by hands that were no longer here. No knob, just a shallow dip where a palm would fit. I pressed my hand there. The door opened without a sound. Inside was a room the size of a storage closet. No windows, no lights. The smoke drifted in and hung, steady and quiet. Shelves lined the walls. On them sat offerings reduced to dust, bowls cracked with age, cups stained dark. Paper money collapsed into grey piles. Everything smelled old and dry. Photographs leaned against the back wall. Faces blurred away like they had been rubbed clean. Eyes gone, mouths gone. Just shapes where people used to be. Wooden plaques hung above the shelves. Blank, no characters carved. No names. The air pressed close. It felt tired, heavy with waiting. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me, soft as a held breath. The smoke thickened. It gathered in the center of the room, shaping itself without hurry. A figure took form. Not clear, not solid, just enough to know it was there. It did not rush me. It did not reach out. It stood like someone who had been standing for a very long time. I knew the feeling before I understood it. The weight of being forgotten, the ache of waiting for a name that never came. I didn't know, I said. My voice sounded small. The smoke shifted. Images moved through it, slow and careful. My grandmother's hands, younger, stronger, writing names on paper slips, then stopping, crossing one out, burning another list, watching the ash fall, voices arguing in low tones. A door closed. A bowl of rice set down with no plaque beside it. I saw fear, not cruelty, choices made late. At night, names erased so the living could sleep, lives left unclaimed so the building would stay quiet. The smoke showed me a truth she never spoke. Some doors were sealed not to trap what was inside, but to keep balance, to keep the weight from. Tipping, the figure drew closer. Not threatening, tired. I felt the incense shorten in my fingers. The heat reached my skin. I didn't pull away. I remember, I said, though I wasn't sure what I remembered. I will. The figure paused. The air eased just a little. The incense burned down to white bone. The smoke thinned. The room dimmed. The door opened behind me. I stepped back into the stairwell. The wall was plain again. Concrete. Empty. The rain softened outside. Thunder moved away in my hand. The incense stick crumbled to ash. It fell through my fingers and vanished before it hit the floor. I stood there for a long time, breathing slow. The pull was gone. In its place was a quiet understanding. Some things were forbidden because they asked too much. Some smoke did not just open doors. It asked you to stand in them. I turned and climbed the stairs, knowing the building would not forget me now, and that I could no longer pretend I had forgotten it. Morning came without light. The sky stayed dull, like it had been rubbed thin. I stood in the kitchen and watched my shadow on the wall. It did not move when I moved. It lagged behind, a breath late, then slid into place. I tried again. I lifted. My hand, the shadow followed after a pause. My reflection in the window did the same. For a moment, it kept staring forward while I turned my head. Then it caught up, eyes blinking once, slow. I touched my face. It felt real, solid, still mine. Outside, the building was quiet. Too quiet for a weekday. Doors stayed shut. The corridor smelled faintly of old smoke and wet concrete. I stepped out, and the lights buzzed, then settled. No one looked at me. On the stairs, I passed the old woman. She carried a bag of fruit, heavy enough to pull her arm low. She did not stop. She did not speak. When our eyes almost met, she looked away. Fear had rules. I was learning them. I walked down the hill toward the river. The air pressed against my skin, cool and close. Shops were open but empty. A man swept the same patch of ground again and again. He did not look up when I passed. At the riverbank, altars lined the railing. Red cloths weighed down by stones. Bowls of rice. Oranges split open to show bright flesh. Incense burned in careful lines. Smoke lifting and drifting away. Names were written on paper, slips, and tucked under bowls. Most were clear, bold strokes. Some were faded, some were blank. I stopped at an altar near the water's edge. The river moved slow and brown, carrying leaves and bits of paper. The sound of it filled the space between thoughts. I took a breath. My pocket felt empty and full at the same time. The last of the black incense rested there, whole and waiting. I understood now. Names were not just sounds, they were weight. To speak, one was to tie yourself to it, to hold it in place. My grandmother had known that. She had chosen silence where she could, chosen peace over balance, chosen to let some drift. I knelt. My voice felt strange in my mouth, like it belonged to someone else. I said the first name. Clearly, let it land. The air tightened, like a string pulled firm. I said another name, louder this time. The river slowed, not stopped, just eased, like it was listening. The smoke from the nearby incense bent toward me. I lit the black incense. The flame held, steady and strong. The stick burned clean, no sputter. Smoke poured out, thick and full, then spread wide. It threaded through the altars, through the space between stones and bowls, through me. The presence returned closer. Now it did not form a shape. It did not need to. It gathered in the smoke, in the way the air pressed back when I breathed in. It felt held, not hungry. I spoke another name. My chest tightened. A memory slipped small, sharp. A street I used to walk. A shop that sold sweet buns. I could see it, then not. The smoke wrapped around my hands. Warm, heavy dart, I kept speaking. Each name took something with it. A face blurred at the edge. A voice lost its tone. I knew they were mine, but they drifted like fog at sunrise. I stayed some. Debts could not be paid without becoming smaller. The city listened. The river held its breath. Even the birds stayed quiet. When the incense burned low, the smoke settled. The pressure eased. The presence thinned, then spread like it had found places to rest. I bowed, not deep, just enough. The walk back felt longer. The hill steeper. My legs tired faster than they should have. At the building, the lift doors opened without a sound. Inside, the mirror showed me whole, but dimmer, like a photo left in sun. My reflection followed me this time. No delay in the corridor. Someone had left fresh fruit outside a door. No name, just an offering. I paused, then kept walking. Inside, the flat, the air felt lighter, the walls less close. I sat at the altar and poured fresh tea. My hands shook. I tried to remember my grandfather's voice. I could hear it, but the words slipped away. I held on to the sound instead. Outside, the storm clouds broke apart. Light slid through, pale and careful. I did not feel afraid. I felt thinner, like a page worn soft at the edges. Night came gentle. The building settled. Pipes clicked, then rested. Somewhere far off, a radio played, low and steady. No static. I lay down and closed my eyes. The dead paused, and in that pause the city breathed. Ghost month ended on a plain morning. No sound marked it. No bell. No last chant. The city woke up and moved on the way it always did. Shop shutters rolled open. Delivery trucks coughed and pulled away. Someone laughed on a phone call near the bus up. Altars were taken down. Bowls emptied. Fruit tossed into bags. Ash swept into piles and dumped without ceremony. Red cloths folded and stored. The streets looked wider after, like they had been holding their breath for weeks, and finally let it go. I stood at the window and watched the smoke thin. It lifted, broke apart, and vanished into the grey sky. The building felt different, not brighter, just lighter. I walked into the corridor and down the stairs. Between the third and second floors, there was only brick. Plain, solid, no seam, number, shadow. If I hadn't known, I would have walked past without a thought. I rested my hand on the wall anyway. It was cool, real. That was enough. Back inside the flat, I packed the last box. There were fewer things now, fewer photos. Some I could not place anymore. Faces that felt close once, but no longer had names. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. The space they left felt shaped, careful, like a stone removed from a pocket after a long walk. On the table sat a small notebook, new, thin. I opened it. Inside were names, not many, just enough to matter. I wrote them slowly, one per page. No extra marks, no notes. I didn't rush. When I finished a name, I paused before turning the page, like giving it time to settle. I closed the notebook and tied it with red string. Outside, I walked down to the river one last time. The water moved steady and brown, carrying bits of light on its surface. Someone nearby fed pigeons. A man washed his hands at the edge and flicked water from his fingers. I knelt where I had knelt before. The last of the incense was gone. No stick, no bundle, just ash in a small paper fold. I opened it and let the ash fall into the river. It didn't sink right away. It spread across the surface, thin and silver, then broke apart and drifted. For a moment, the light caught it just right. It looked like moving stars. Then it was gone. I bowed. Not because I had to, because it felt right. The walk back up the hill felt easier. My steps matched the street. My breath matched my body. The city no longer pushed back. In the corridor, the old woman's door stood open. She was inside, sweeping. "You're leaving," she said without looking up. Yes, she nodded once. "You did well." I didn't know what to say to that. I just bowed. She paused, then added, "Remember what you learned." "I will." She swept the last line of dust into her pan and closed the door. That evening, dusk settled soft and slow. The building hummed low, content. Pipes clicked, then rested. A window down the hall let out the sound of a cooking show. Oil sizzled. Someone laughed. I sat by the window with a notebook in my lap. When the sky darkened, I spoke one name. Quiet, clear. The air did not tighten. It listened. Nothing followed me. No shadow moved on its own. No reflection lagged behind. I felt whole. Changed, but held. That was the mercy. What stayed was the work. Once a year, I would return. I would bring fruit, rice, tea. I would speak names softly and with care. Not to summon, not to open doors, to tend. Remembrance was not a trap. It was a shelter. As night settled, smoke drifted from other windows. Ordinary incense. Shared fires. Safe in company. I understood the warning at last. It was never a threat. It was a care. Instruction. Some fires are meant to be shared. Some must never be lit alone.